It always begins in the silence, not the peaceful kind, not the hush of nightfall or the soft stillness after prayer, but the hollow kind. The kind that follows after grief. The kind that hums in your ears like static and clings to your skin like the scent of the dead. That night, it was just Jonathan Bell and the silence. 7 days had passed since he buried his sister, Lily. 7 days since he watched the casket lower into the earth and told himself she was finally at peace. But peace is a fragile lie when you bury the truth with the body, and lies don't rest easy in the ground. At 3:03 a.m., his phone lit up in the dark. No name, no number, just a missed call and a voicemail. He sat up slowly, heart stuttering. There had been no ringtone, no buzz. Just that blinking notification, as if the call had slipped into his phone like a shadow crawling beneath a door. He pressed play, and what came through was not a voice meant for the land of the living. It was her, Lily. Her breath was shallow, strained, a sound like dirt shifting, a click like bone against wood. Then a whisper, no louder than a prayer behind closed lips. "I'm still here. Why did you leave me?" Terror doesn't scream at you at first. It kneels beside you, whispers in your ear, presses cold fingers to the back of your neck, and waits for you to look over your shoulder. He dropped the phone, backed away, choked on the air that suddenly felt too thick to breathe. But fear doesn't come without a witness. And somewhere in that house, in the walls or the wires or the very blood of the foundation, something had heard the message too. Something old. Something waiting. Lily's voice had a softness to it when she was alive, the kind of voice that could quiet storms in people's minds. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She painted in silence and prayed in solitude. But in the last weeks before her death, something in her changed. She'd whisper things in her sleep, things Jonathan could barely understand. Talk of the one beneath, of crows that wouldn't leave her windowsill, of mirrors that no longer reflected her face correctly. She said her paintings would move when she wasn't looking. She said he was watching. She said her name wasn't safe anymore. And then she died, alone, with her eyes open, and no one could explain why. When the voicemail came, he should have deleted it. He should have run. But some grief masquerades as devotion, and some love won't rest until the soul is either healed or swallowed whole. He drove to the cemetery at dawn, guided not by sense but by something deeper, a pull like a hook in the belly of his spirit. As he drove, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with crows, hundreds of them, circling above the tree line like black ribbons unraveling in slow motion. The gate creaked open as if waiting. No wind. No footsteps but his own. Only the sound of leaves rustling in warning. He walked to her grave. Lily Ann Bell, 1999-2025, beloved sister. Gentle soul. A verse was carved below. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Psalm 20:34, he knelt, and the earth beneath him breathed. Yes, it moved as if exhaling slowly, rising and falling, not with the wind, but with the weight of something waking beneath it. Then a sound, not imagined, not hallucinated, a tap. Then again, 3 knocks. Tap, 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 from inside the grave. He reeled back, heart slamming against bone, and his phone rang again. 3:03 p.m. Same number, same ancient darkness dripping through the speaker. He didn't answer, but he listened. And the second message was worse. He sees you now, the one who watches from beneath. I tried to stay asleep, but he woke me. A shiver crawled down his spine like a centipede, because her voice was lower now, not just in tone, but in place. It sounded deeper, more buried, not just in the ground, but in something else, in history, in sin, in a darkness older than names. There is a truth no man wants to face, that sometimes the dead do not rest, not because they're angry, not because they're cursed, but because something claimed them, something waited until they were weakest, until they were alone, until no one was watching but the eyes in the dark. Jonathan stared at the grave, and suddenly he remembered her last painting. The one she never showed anyone. The one he found burned in her fireplace, half saved, half consumed. It showed a hand reaching up from the soil, not hers. Something with fingers too long, skin cracked like dry earth. A hand that didn't reach to be rescued, but to pull someone under. The book of Job says, "The dead tremble, those who dwell beneath the waters, and all that live in them." Sheol is naked before God. Job 106, 6 and 5-6. So why do we act as though the veil between life and death is steel when God himself says it is naked? Why do we bury our dead with flowers and scripture, pretending that evil doesn't linger around open graves? Jonathan realized the voicemail wasn't just a message. It was a summons. A thin place had opened. The sound of her coffin was not memory, not madness. It was invitation. And something down there, something with no name or a name too terrible to speak, was calling for him now. The question was no longer, is she still there? It was, what else is? And why had it waited until now to speak? There is something unholy about silence in a dead woman's apartment. Not the silence of absence, but the kind that lingers like breath held too long. The kind that waits for you to speak first, just so it can answer. Jonathan stepped through Lily's door with the hesitance of someone entering a tomb. The lights didn't work. The windows had been sealed from the inside, and the air was stiff with the scent of wax, old paint, and something sour underneath, the coppery ghost of blood long dried and hidden. He hadn't entered her home since the night he found her, face down, eyes open. A single trail of crimson dripping from her ear onto the floorboards like the mark of Cain. They said it was an overdose. But he knew she hadn't touched anything since she was 13. She feared chemicals, refused aspirin, fasted for days if a new medication touched her tongue. Not out of paranoia, but because she believed something was inside her that could only be fed by silence and prayer. And now he could feel it, not in the shadows, not in the corners, but in the walls. Like something breathing just behind the drywall, following him, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. He found the box beneath her bed. It wasn't hidden well, as though she wanted it to be found, not by just anyone, but by him. Wooden, unvarnished, ancient yet handmade. Its lid was burned with symbols not known to this world's alphabet, not letters, but warnings. Shapes that pulsed with meaning like they'd been branded into the wood by fire and pain. A triangle inside a circle. 3 vertical lines, not straight but curved, twisting, as if reaching upward or downward. He didn't want to open it, not because of fear, but reverence. Because whatever was sealed inside wanted out. Inside, he found 4 items, each a key, each a wound. A black and white photograph. A much younger Lily stood barefoot before the charred skeleton of a house he didn't recognize. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, arms bandaged. Someone had written on the back, "Do not forget the fire." He came through the smoke. A child's drawing. It showed a little girl in bed, tiny, curled under the blanket, and a towering figure standing beside her, featureless, eyes like empty moons. Above the figure were the words, written in shaky block letters, "Who watches when I sleep. He's in the floor." A black feather. Long, sharpened at the edges like it had been burned clean. As Jonathan touched it, the lights flickered, even though the electricity had been off since the funeral. And the journal, bound in red thread, stiff and cracking at the edges like it had been buried for years and dug back up by shaking hands. He opened it. The first few entries were simple, reflections, paintings, scriptures. But as the pages turned, the handwriting grew frantic, Onevin, bleeding through the paper like the ink was screaming. "The dreams are growing teeth. I don't sleep anymore," he speaks through the ringing. "Every painting now shows AIM, always taller, always closer. And then came the passage that broke him. He is not a demon in the traditional sense. He is older, from before language, before form. He enters through sound. He waits inside of static. He lingers in voicemail. That's how he got in before. Jonathan's skin went cold because he remembered as a child, Lily had screamed at a toy phone, refused to touch it for years. She'd told their mother something was whispering back. He'd forgotten, dismissed it, but it had never stopped. Further in the journal, more came to light, the kind of truth that unravels sanity. His name must not be spoken. Mother changed mine to protect me. She said he tracks through bloodlines, and when you speak the name, you invite him in, and the last entry, half burned, soaked in something dark. He speaks through 303, because that is when the veil thins, the hour between death and deception. If I die, he's not done. He wants you next. The firstborn. He said your name while I slept. He said, Jonathan. The floor creaked. Jonathan froze. The air was thick now, soupy and heavy, like the atmosphere itself was mourning. Then the house moaned. A long, not wood, not settling, breathing. And then his phone vibrated at 3:03 a.m. He stared at the screen. No number, just a dark blankness. Not even unknown caller, just void. He didn't answer. But the call didn't go to voicemail either. It just stayed, buzzing, waiting. When it finally cut off, he exhaled until the voicemail notification lit up. He pressed play, Lily's voice again. This time raspier, closer. He buried me beneath the wrong name. The ground won't hold me. The veil is torn, and he is using my voice now. Jonathan dropped the phone, because in the mirror across the room, just for a second, Lily was standing behind him, pale, weeping, mouth stitched shut, and in her hand she held the same black box. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world. Ephesians 6:12, the enemy wasn't death. It was what waited beneath it, something that didn't want souls, it wanted names. Because names are altars, names are doors, and her real name was never Lily. It was something older, something holy or cursed. Jonathan looked back at the journal and whispered the name aloud, and the floor beneath him opened. Names are more than sounds. They are seals. They are summons. From the moment of birth, a name marks your spirit, binds your story to the heavens, or hands you over to something darker, something beneath. And as Jonathan stood again over his sister's grave, her name carved in delicate stone, he realized it wasn't hers, not truly. The wind howled, sharp as a cry from a wounded soul. The cemetery bent in stillness. The trees surrounding the plot swayed like mourners at an ancient funeral. Lily Ann Bell, that was the name etched on the tomb. But in her journal, torn, stained, hidden, she had written her truth. They gave me a new name when the fire came. Mother said my birth name would call Shem back. So I became Lily, but I was born Lilith Aurora. The name Lilith, not just a name, a warning. A riddle passed through time, from ancient myth to burning prophecy. Jonathan remembered it once, just once. When she was 13, she had painted it across her wall in strokes of crimson oil, La'ilite H, and 2 hours later, she had scraped it off with her bare hands, fingernails cracked and bleeding. She didn't speak for 3 days after that. And now he knew why. Because in naming herself, even just once, she had opened a door. He stared at her grave. Something about it felt wrong. The earth sat loose, unsettled, like it had been disturbed. Not once, but over and over again. His phone buzzed again, 3:03 a.m. This time, he didn't look away. No number, just the void. And when he answered, he heard no voice. Just earth shifting. Something crawling between layers of soil. Then the sound of wood creaking, like a lid being pressed open from inside, and a whisper, but not Lily's. This voice was male, thick, gravelly, wet, like it had drowned centuries ago and still hadn't coughed up its last breath. The grave does not own her, I do. Her name was the contract. Yours is the debt. Jonathan dropped the phone, eyes wide, chest pounding. He took a step back, and the ground beneath him sank, just an inch. But it moved, soft, too soft. He fell to his knees, digging madly with his bare hands. He didn't know why, only that something inside him demanded proof. And what he found made the breath leave his body. There was no coffin, no lining, no body. Just a hollow space, emptier than it should have been. And in that hollow, something carved into the dirt wall in fingernails and blood. Wrong name, wrong death. He took me instead. He ran, half crawled, half stumbled back to the surface. But as he rose, a shadow passed over the moon. Not a cloud, not a bird, but a figure, tall, thin, elongated, just for a moment. And then gone, he returned home in silence. He didn't speak, didn't sleep. Just opened the journal again and again, trying to decode the warnings hidden between every word. He burrows into bloodlines. He doesn't just haunt, he inherits. Firstborn sons, the ones who hear the call, the ringing, and then this came through mirrors first, then the phone, then the coffin. Always at 3 the moment between rest and reckoning. The number 3003 echoed now in his bones. Not just time, but pattern. 3 knocks, 3 feathers, 3 figures in her final painting. And suddenly, he understood. This wasn't about her anymore. It never was. She was the offering. He was the inheritance. He opened his laptop, researched the name Lilith Aurora. No birth certificate, no hospital records, nothing. It was as if she had never existed, except for one obituary in a burned downtown called Crossvale Fire. 13 dead, 1 survivor, girl Lilith Aurora, age 8. That's all it said. No follow-up, no picture, no context. She had survived something, but what had followed her out? That night his phone rang again. He didn't answer. But when he turned off the screen, the reflection on the black glass did not match his face. It blinked slower, smiled when he did not. And behind it, in the mirror's depth, stood Lily, or what used to be Lily. Eyes sewn shut, a black feather pinned through her chest. Her mouth moved, but it was his voice that came out. He speaks through me now. He dropped the phone. It shattered, but even shattered, it kept ringing. Scripture says, the tongue has the power of life and death. Proverbs 18:21. So what happens when the voice of the dead is hijacked by something that never lived? What happens when we bury our loved ones beneath names that were never theirs, and in doing so, deny the truth of who they were? We don't just silence history. We resurrect the wrong spirit. Jonathan understood too late. He hadn't just buried his sister, he had buried a covenant. And now the covenant was broken. The mirror cracked, 3 slow fractures. And from the crack, not glass, but soil began to pour. A soft, steady stream of earth spilling onto his bedroom floor, cold damp, filled with the scent of rot and old breath. He tried to run, but the door wouldn't open. The phone wouldn't die. The mirror kept bleeding dirt, and behind him, he heard a voice whisper from under the floorboards. One never buried her. We planted her. You can outrun grief, you can outrun guilt, but you cannot outrun a summons. And by the time Jonathan realized what this was, not a haunting, not a nightmare, but a spiritual inheritance, it was too late, because the ringing had never been just a phone call. It was the final toll of a bell rung long ago, echoing from the moment of her birth to the hour of her burial to the second her name was finally spoken again. 3:03 a.m. Every night, without fail, the moment when the veil thins and the earth listens. The moment when doors not built by human hands begin to open. And now the door was fully ajar. The night it ended, the sky itself seemed to darken. Not with clouds, but with silence. The wind stopped. The insects ceased their choir. Even the lights in the neighboring buildings went dim, not off, but choked like they were being strangled by invisible fingers. Jonathan sat in the middle of his living room, Surrounded by symbols he had redrawn from Lily's journal, salt ash, and scripture. A crude defense. A child's fort against a spiritual storm. But some storms you don't weather. You witness. The phone rang. Not once, not twice, but 3 times simultaneously. 3 phones, 3 identical unknown numbers, each vibrating at 3:03 a.m., each emitting a low, vibrating hum like a voice trapped beneath the ocean. And then all 3 went to voicemail at once. And from the speaker came a sound that no man should ever hear, wood splintering, nails dragging. A heartbeat, a second heartbeat, then breathing. But not just one, layered, echoing thousands of voices whispering as one. Then came Lily's voice again, but it was wrong. The pitch too high, the cadence too slow, as if her words had been stretched by something crawling across centuries. You should not have spoken my name. He rides upon it now. You tried to bury me in peace. But peace does not hold what was never claimed by heaven. He is here. Not in the grave, not in the mirror, not in the phone, but in you. Jonathan couldn't move. His legs no longer felt like his. His breath came in short, trembling bursts, and beneath him the ground pulsed. Not the floor, the ground, as though the apartment itself no longer rested on concrete, but on soil. Then the final sound. 3 knocks, this time not from below, but from inside the closet he stood, drawn, compelled, the kind of obedience that only ancient spirits command, not through force, but through ownership. He opened the door. Inside, nothing. No clothes, no walls. Just a corridor of dirt, a tunnel. Carved, ancient. The air smelled of myrrh and blood. Faint candlelight flickered somewhere below. And a staircase spiraled downward, impossibly deep. For you were bought with a price. 1 Corinthians 6:20, most people forget that Scripture reminds us our bodies are not our own. They belong to the one who purchased them. But if we are not sealed by heaven, then who bought us? Jonathan descended, not with courage, not with fear, but with surrender. The deeper he went, the louder the voices became, not shouting, but praying. She is the gate, he is the key. She is the breath, he is the dirt. At the bottom, he found a chamber. The coffin lay open in the center. But it wasn't hers, it was his. Inside a mirror. Inside the mirror, his reflection, still standing at the top of the stairs. Still alive. Still human. Still untouched. But he wasn't there anymore. Not truly. Because the reflection smiled and began to walk away, leaving him behind in the dark, and then came her voice, Lily's true voice, no longer distorted. Soft. Tired. But free. I tried to warn you. I tried to hold the door shut. But you wouldn't leave me buried. You answered the call. And now I am free. She appeared beside the coffin, eyes open, mouth sewn shut, but now smiling. She stepped into the light. And behind her, something followed. It didn't crawl. It towered. The thing that owned her voice, her name, her death. Tall, covered in soot and feathers. Hands like broken branches. A face like a collapsed cathedral. Beautiful once, but now ruined by fire and age. It spoke without moving. Jonathan Bell, firstborn, last offering. The name has been paid in full. The lights dimmed. The coffin closed. The staircase vanished. And Jonathan Bell ceased to exist in this world. Epilogue, the apartment was found abandoned. Every mirror shattered. Every phone melted. The walls scratched with the same 3 symbols found on the box beneath Lily's bed. A final voicemail was recorded. Timestamp 3:03 a.m. The message transcribed by the authorities read, "The last call came from her coffin, but the next will come from yours." And now, somewhere, a phone rings. No number, no signal, just a soft knock from behind your wall. And if you answer even for a second, you'll hear the voice, not hers, not his, not yours, but the voice of what waits. And it always calls back.